money, your taxes, your truck, and your road to success in the trucking industry. This is Trucking Business and Beyond, the show that puts the money where it belongs, back in your pocket.
Good morning, you beautiful bunch of fuckers, and welcome to my world. I'm your host, Kevin Rutherford. It is Friday, July 19th. We are here live. The phone lines are open. I might be flying solo. Oh, nope. Looks like I do have somebody here with me. I think this looks like it's going to be Joel. Did I get it right?
No.
Henry.
Ten.
So I'm not flying
How are
solo
you?
today. Well, I'm sort of good, although wasn't all really happy about the news I woke up to this morning.
All right. What kind of news made you happy this morning?
No, made me unhappy. I was happy when I woke up.
Oh, unhappy.
Until I read the news. This is a big topic of mine. I talk about it all the time. I try to warn people because truck drivers are more vulnerable to this kind of stuff. We right now are probably experiencing the largest worldwide IT outage we've seen so far. Every time this happens, it gets a little worse, a little deeper, affects more people. I'm still trying to catch up on everything that's been affected. So far, I've heard from a driver where their entire terminal's been shut down since midnight. No trucks going in and out. They can't get fuel. Airlines are being horribly affected all over the world. Worldwide shutdowns by 3 or 4 airlines. They're just parked. They can't move. Hospitals. Hospitals are being affected. I heard from one person who works at a hospital that their hospital software systems directly weren't affected, but their security system was, and they had to break down doors in the ICU to get to patients.
So I guess I can add to your list then this morning, and that is that when I called the Jeep dealer to get a part for my Jeep, they could not look it up because all their IT is down.
Yep, and the car dealers just got hit a couple weeks ago. It was specifically car dealers. You know how we have what we would call a TMS, a transportation management system?
Right.
Every industry has a management system of some kind. Ours is called a TMS, and really what it is it's a specific set of software that lets you run a specific business. It's written for that industry. So in our industry, the big player would be McLeod. You know, a lot of companies run their entire trucking company on McLeod software. It's their dispatch, their fuel tax, their accounting, their payroll, their HR. And if McLeod gets attacked, then you might have, hundreds of trucking companies affected because they all use the same software. And that's what's happening here.
Yeah, it's great technology, and you got to wonder at what point do we get ourselves too dependent upon it?
Well, here's where...
Even though I believe in it.
I think we're already too dependent on it. And what the reason I bring this up, look, if the average American who is at home and maybe their spouse is at work or the kids are at school, I mean, these kind of things can cause problems then. Cell phones go down. We're so used to being able to just pick up a phone and communicate.
Right.
And we've become dependent on that now. We kind of fall apart if we can't pick up our phone and talk to somebody every second of the day. But think about drivers. When banking systems go down, you pull into a truck stop, you may not be able to get fuel, and you won't be able to get a cash advance. And your credit card might not work at all at that place. Now, what are you going to do? You can't get fuel, you can't eat, you can't do anything if you don't have cash. I tell drivers you should have several $1,000s of cash with you at all times.
So it wouldn't be a bad idea to keep the reserve system. Remember how they used to put your credit card in and run the thing back and forth across it on the carbon paper?
Right, yeah.
And the other thing I'm remembering along that subject, James F. Wilde, it was a Napa dealer in New Holland, Pennsylvania, where I used to go when I had my first car, and there wasn't an AutoZone on every corner back then. And I remember their entire, I mean, I was into cars and a gearhead, so, you know, I thought, man, I was at my playground, right?
Yeah.
And I remember the whole entire top of the counter was books to look stuff up.
Oh, exactly. Big books,
And
really big books.
And they did, and the good parts people didn't need that book most of the time.
Correct.
But what was funny, that was an older place that had some people in there, and it was a great place to get parts if you were having a hard time finding one or trying to find where it would be, because they, under the counter, was completely filled with old parts books going all the way back into the 40s.
So, Henry, I grew up the same way. I was a gearhead. I was, you know, adjusting and replacing jets on a carburetor on my Honda Mini Trail 50 when I was like 8 years old. And so I always had motorcycles, and then I started with cars early, and then I started painting cars. So you're still in the parts store with, you know, getting paint and thinner and all the stuff you need. So, I mean, that was my life. I spent a lot of time in parts stores growing up, and it's exactly like you just described. These guys, you'd walk in and ask for the most odd thing, and they'd just walk back and grab it off the shelf and bring it to you, and it'd be right. Or if you didn't, or they were all good for advice on how to fix the car too, because they were all gearheads. They wouldn't have been working there, and they wouldn't know all that if they didn't do it. So not only did you get the right part without a VIN number, you actually got advice on, you know, what might be going wrong or a better way to fix it or make sure you don't do this. And you know, a trip to the parts store might be an hour and a half by the time you got out of there. But it was a good hour and a half.
But no, sometimes it was quicker because they, you know, if you went in and said, I need a GM distributor cap, and they were like HEI or the other.
Exactly. Now you walk in and
Does
say,
it have air conditioning?
Now it's so bad you walk in and you say, hey, I need a clutch for, you know, a 69 Camaro. And they'll say, is it a manual or automatic?
Well, yeah, but then once you get past that part, they want to know if it has air conditioning.
And leather or vinyl seats.
Well, yeah. At which point it usually gets me to where I want to order a radiator cap for a Corvair or something.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, the one thing that drives you crazy with truck parts that seems to be much worse even with cars. With trucks, it's like there are places where if you don't have a VIN number, you're not getting the part. And then when you try to tell them, look, I get it, but that part was not on my truck originally. I want to now put it on my truck. And I know it goes on this truck, but then you got to go find a VIN number of a truck that had that part. Because sometimes they're so dependent on that VIN number.
It was fun with race cars that way when I used to build my own cars, and I had models made up to get different stuff to begin with.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
but you know, like most of GM was 2 clutches for the whole entire, didn't matter what brand.
You're right. Yeah. Well, and we'll think about how simple headlights were. For years you had
3
round headlights, and one was a standard headlight, and one was a high beam headlight, and that was it. And then they came out with rectangular headlights.
There was more because it was the small ones for 4 headlight systems, and the 2 headlight ones were bigger. So you actually had 3 different ones.
Okay, you're right. And then somewhere in the 80s, it feels like we started getting rectangular headlights and a couple other shapes, and it got a little more complicated. Now you look
they were big and small.
Yeah. Now you look at these headlight systems, and they are so unbelievably complicated for a light.
Well, it went even simpler there for a while because for a little bit, just a short piece in time, it didn't matter what your headlight housing looked like. It took the same bulb inside.
Right. So if all
for
you were
just a short period of time with the halogen.
Well, and for how long did every vehicle on the road have the same 2 bulbs for the taillights? You had a simple bulb for the taillight, and then the offset bulb was your stop and turn signal. And that was every vehicle on the road used the same 2 bulbs. Oh, and then you had one for a backup light.
What was it? 1152?
Yeah, something like
that. I'm trying to remember what the number was.
Right. Yeah. So the point with drivers, again, if you start thinking about this, look, you could be 2,000 miles away from home and cell phone communications can go down. Now you can't call home. You can't communicate with anybody at home. Credit cards go down. If you don't have cash, you're screwed. Fuel deliveries could be stopped. I don't even know how you prepare for that one. If you can't get fuel, you're not going anywhere. But do you have some basic food and water and cash with you? And we are so dependent on these systems now that you have to stop and think, because this is a clear pattern. If we're not finally seeing that this isn't conspiracy theory talk, this is happening, and every time it happens, it's bigger and it's worse. And they're saying this one is really massive, and it's affecting a lot of different industries, and we're talking worldwide. There are at least 3 airlines that shut down all flights worldwide.
Huh.
And in England, for some reason, it seems to be affecting a lot of medical facilities and doctors' offices. But then I also, like I said, I heard from a hospital here that said everything is up except our security system, and we can't get into doors because these locks are all controlled by software. In South Africa, for some reason, it seems to be hitting banks. And I think the reason is that it can hit so many different industries, where last time it was car dealers specifically. They attacked a TMS. Well, not a TMS, whatever the car dealers call their management systems.
Right.
They attacked the largest provider. Like I said, it would be McLeod for TMS probably. But it affected one industry. That one went on for like 5 or 6 days, or maybe longer. I kind of stopped following it, but that one did not get solved quickly. Car dealers couldn't sell parts. They couldn't schedule people to come in. They couldn't sell cars. They had no access to any of the systems they needed. So this time, the reason it's hitting so many different industries is because they did go after the security software. It turns out it's a cybersecurity software program that companies use to protect themselves against this stuff. But what happened, they're saying it's not an attack. It was a coding error. Well, I hate to be the guy who made that mistake, because I was just looking at this company's stock, and they've lost about $15 billion this morning on their stock price. Imagine our world has become so complicated. One guy in a cubicle somewhere makes a keystroke error, and this is what we're dealing with. That's what they're making it sound like. I know it's never that simple, but that's kind of what they're saying. We did an update and we had a coding error.
Well, if you think about how dependent we have gotten upon these silly devices that are in our hands half the time, and if that goes down, the regular phone network, it's still somewhat there, but my gosh, how often can you find a payphone?
Well, I haven't had a home phone in well over a decade. I never got a home phone when I moved to Oregon. I didn't have one when I was in Colorado, the last place I lived either. So it's been quite a while for me. I don't know if I've had a home phone since I left Florida. That was a long time ago.
So when you think about it, we could get disconnected pretty good.
That's what I mean. And again, I bring this up and talk about it a lot because of how it is a much, much bigger impact on drivers who could be thousands of miles away from their family. Their family might be dealing with this at home. They may be dealing with it on the road. Both may be dealing with it. You may not be able to communicate. And so at least you need to have some cash. It'd be a really good idea to have cash, because banking systems are all electronic, and we've had instances where credit cards just stop working. You should probably have some basic food and water, and you should, have not a big deal in the summertime, but when this kind of stuff happens in the wintertime, you probably want to have some survival gear with you too. I talk
Yep.
about this all the time.
Yeah, I'm
and
usually good on all those fronts.
every
Not
one
on
of
having enough necessary money, but probably if they take all the rest down, you won't be able to pump it anyway. But
well, here's the
I'm
thing. I
usually
mean,
within range of
you
getting
know,
home, though.
yeah. I mean, if you think about it, if I can't get fuel, I can't communicate, and credit cards aren't working, there are still places I can get to and at least buy food if I have cash. Or maybe
Right.
it's maybe I could even rent a car if I had to. I we don't know what to expect, what's going to go down, what problems it's going to cause. So my approach is always, let's be prepared for the worst case scenario.
And I've been known to go for a long walk already.
Exactly. Right. I carry something around in my car. People think I'm a freak for this. But I kind of set one up for everybody in the family called a get home bag. And it's a pretty darn good sized backpack with enough stuff for if I had to walk 500 miles, I could probably do it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's you put it
Yeah.
together one time and you just keep it in the vehicle. And I've got one I think I've got one in almost every vehicle we have. But and my hope is all of these things, when I talk about being prepared and the stuff that I do, my hope is that it is exactly like insurance. I hate the fact that I have to pay for insurance every month and never use it, but I love the fact that I never have to use it. It's kind of the same way with all this,
Mm-hmm.
being prepared stuff. I didn't necessarily want to do all this,
Well, that's
but
warranty and things that way.
but I'd much rather do this than be stuck with the 99% of other people that won't be prepared, and then the problem gets bigger. So imagine if we have a major outage and everybody individually was prepared. Well, then it's not that big of a deal. We'll get through it. It'll be inconvenient. But if nobody's prepared, and this is where FEMA and the government, and they got to come in and start supplying food and water, and now it becomes a problem. I don't want to be in the masses fighting for a bottle of water.
Well, that's what puts you at a disadvantage when the 99% aren't prepared and you're the 1%. You better not let them know that you were prepared.
Well, I'm also prepared for the fact that if they figure out that I'm prepared, I've got that covered too.
Yeah, there's enough volume that can overcome that.
Well, believe me, I've thought about all of this.
Yep.
Yeah, and
when there's 1,000 people coming at you.
Well, you're right. If you're on the road, and I think about this when I travel, because I still travel sometimes long trips by the coach where I'm 2,000 miles away from home. I'm in that exact same situation drivers are. And that's why I kind of help them. Here's what I do to be prepared if that happens. And if it happens on the road and I'm gone, whether I flew somewhere and this happens, or I drove somewhere and the coach and this happened, that's the worst case scenario. If I'm here, I don't even worry about the thousands of people. I'm in a pretty remote place, and I have property that's even more remote than what I am now, very remote. And that's not necessarily all
have
by
you ever
accident.
seen the series when it was on Jericho?
No.
This is my homework assignment for you.
Oh, hey, now you just reminded me. Now I know why Joel and Alec didn't show up, because they were going to show up and have to say the dog ate their homework. They didn't do their homework. That's why they didn't.
I didn't even hear the homework assignment last week because I was working a show.
Yeah, I thought I clarified it for you, though. Remember the standout assessment?
No.
Yeah, see.
I had to keep putting my headset down because I had two conversations going and it was driving me crazy.
Yeah, see, I know all these tricks because I used to do this at school. If I didn't do the homework, I just wouldn't show up for a while.
Well, yeah. But anyway, Jericho, the basis of it, there's a nuclear attack on almost every major city in the country, but nobody knows why. In this little town, I want to say it's in Kansas, called Jericho, and all the towns start forming their own governments, and they're fighting against each other, and sometimes they're forming allies, and it's like miniature forms of government, but nobody knows who took it out or what happened.
Oh yeah.
And it goes on. It went a couple years. It was a good series. The only thing I didn't like about it is they ended it too quick. But
Oh yeah.
it really made you think all the way through it. It's called Jericho. It's really good. You would like it.
Well, yeah, I bet I would.
It's not mind numbing.
I read because I read all the time, and I
In
will
fact,
read.
I'll tell you how it happened for me, Kevin.
Yeah.
I didn't watch much television in my truck. Never did. And I happened to turn on the TV in Jacksonville, Florida, where there was enough stations on that I saw the first one.
Oh, okay.
And I said, "Oh my gosh, this is good."
You're right.
And then I got where I was watching it, and at the high water of it, where it was getting really good, I actually stopped at a mall to watch the TVs playing at the mall to see what happened that week. It was terrible. It was like Who Shot JR?
Yeah. So, one of the things that got me thinking about this in the very beginning and realizing how unprepared I was, and if somebody would have asked me at the time, I would have said, "No, I'm pretty well prepared," but I wasn't even close. I hadn't even really put any thought into it. But I read books constantly. I read books for research, for health, for business, whatever. But I also just love to read novels. I read a lot. And I'll try anything. You know, I have some favorite genres. I love true crime. But I just, especially now with a Kindle, it's so easy. I used to go and spend an entire day in a bookstore about once a month. I just go hang out at the bookstore, and I'd walk out with eight to 10 books that would last me, 2 months or so. Now with the Kindle, they show me books every time I open it up. Here's some books you might be interested in. And I get book recommendations all the time from people. And while they're giving me the book recommendation on the air, before they're done, it's already on my Kindle if I'm interested in it. I mean, it's just so easy to buy a book now. So I get to try.
I need to do that.
And I also have Kindle Unlimited, which is part of Prime, Amazon Prime. So I have access to tens of thousands of books free. It's kind of like a library because I'm a Prime member. I just check out a book, and I can have up to 10 books on my Kindle, 10 free books on my Kindle at a time. If I want a new one, I just have to delete one. And so I get to try all kinds of books. Yeah, and I saw this book, and this was, quite a few years ago now. It's coming up on a decade maybe. And the title of the book was 1 Second After. It's a really good book. And the premise of the book, and I had never even heard of this prior to this, was the country is hit by an EMP, and it wipes out the entire grid across the country. And the idea, the title of the book, is that if you wait till 1 second after this happens, it's too late to ever prepare. Because now everything is shut down, and it's just chaos within 24 hours. And it just gets worse from there. And the prediction on this, and this prediction comes not from some, weird right-wing blogger, comes from the government itself, that if that were to occur, because the government has done all kinds of studies on this, and they should be prepared, but they're not. But the estimate is, if the United States were ever hit with a full, and this doesn't have to be an EMP from some other country that attacked us. A solar flare can do the exact same thing. And we're having some real issues with solar flares, and our poles are moving right now. But whether it was a solar flare completely natural, or it was an EMP triggered by an atomic weapon, some other country attacks us with it, the estimate is 90% of our population would die in the first 12 months. 90%.
I believe that.
Yeah. Yeah, we are so dependent on electricity and technology that we don't know how to live without it anymore.
Yeah, I believe that. But anyway, check out Jericho. I think you will really like that.
Yeah, that sounds
Other
interesting.
ones, books that I remember, I used to go to this thrift store that got a lot of books in it. and I just grab whatever was there, right?
Yeah.
Because you had $1.05 invested in it, so
Exactly.
who cared, right?
Yeah.
And read Jack Welch. And one of my favorites was, and as a matter of fact, it's on YouTube as well, is the history of George Westinghouse.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know anybody that isn't lazy compared to him. I think Elon Musk would feel lazy if he read his book.
It was pretty incredible. Yeah, he was a pretty unusual human being, that's for sure.
And the inventor of the weekend.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ironic.
I wish he would have made it a little longer.
Well, it was a day and a half when he started it, but there was none before he started, so that was a pretty marked change.
Yeah, sure was. Hey, let's get to some phone calls. We're going to go to New Mexico. Jerry, good morning.
Holy cow, first up. Can't hardly believe it. So
First up.
Wow. Refresh your memory, Kevin. 1156 and 1157 were the two bulb numbers.
There you go. That's exactly
1156
right.
was the single element, and 1157 was the dual element.
And
that's right.
And the 56 was the two little studs were even, and on the 57 they were offset.
Yep. They were, because it had to go in one way because it was a two-element bulb, and the 1156 was a
Could go in
single-element bulb, so it didn't matter which way you put it in.
Yep. Simple times.
I couldn't come up with the number. I was hung up on J1939 in my head for some reason.
Well, that may be right on something you had, Henry. I don't know, but Henry, I'm glad you're on. I got questions for you.
All right,
go ahead.
I'm having a hell of a time finding a used truck. There is almost non-existent in the 6x2 in the used market. I've looked on truck paper and can't hardly find a 6x2. May end up with a 6x4, but here's where really the question I've got now is, on the DT12 transmission, how many different models do they make? They make a direct drive and an overdrive. Is that the two models they make? And then the secondary question is what's the final ratio on the overdrive version of the DT12?
So, yeah, there's a few more models than that, but that has to do with the work rating. But anyway, it's direct and overdrive is 0.78.
0.78. Okay, that's what I could never figure out. I even Googled it, and I could never figure out. All I could find on Google was the tremendous benefits of the DT12, but nobody bothered to get far enough down in the details to tell you what the actual final ratio was. So you at 261, you're down in the
203.
What? 203. So if I find a direct drive with a 216, that still wouldn't be too outrageously of a.
No, 216.
That'd be okay, wouldn't it?
Yeah, 216 is a good combination.
So what's the range of overdrives? Like you've got a 261 rear end ratio, I believe you said before. Is that about the highest you could get on the overdrive version? And then how high does the overdrive version go? Like 285s?
Because at this point, they don't have a deep enough first to go farther the other direction.
Okay. So what's about the highest that they would go on a single overdrive? I mean, I'm finding some in the used market like up to even to 285s.
285 if it's a DT12 is the same as a 228 direct. And as a matter of fact,
yeah, right.
all of the 12 speeds, whether it's Volvo, Mack, PACCAR, Navistar, or Daimler, the one nice thing is all the overdrives right now currently are 0.78 that are 12 speeds sold here in the United States.
Oh, that's easy to remember then. I can even remember that.
There you go.
Well, okay, that makes it. I just assumed that some of them were different than that, but okay. Well, I'm just having an awful time. I keep looking and I keep looking and I keep looking for used trucks, and so many of these big dealers have their own websites, and they don't put them on truck paper, and then you try to find them on their own websites, and they differentiate the specifications different than maybe truck paper does. It's just been a extremely frustrating experience, and it's been been 18 years since I bought a truck, and I'm just a little out of practice at looking at this stuff. So
I hear you. Well, private message me. I know of a dealer that's put together a lot of specs that are similar to mine, but not the lift axle or the 6x2 part of it, but geared right and the right wheelbases, which finding the two of them together on one truck's pretty much a project anymore. But because all their new trucks that they've sold to their customers have been pretty close to right on the wheelbase and the gear ratio, consequently, their used trucks that are getting turned in are correct.
okay. All right. Well, I set my criteria too specific, and one dealer I even sent a picture of your spec sheet that you have in front of your truck at the truck show, and I mean, it's like he didn't even look at it. He sent me back 5 choices, and they weren't even they weren't even similar. They weren't even the same ballpark as your spec.
Hey, Jerry.
And I finally asked him. I said, "Well, none of these are 6x2," and
Jerry.
No.
As much as I complain about that kind of stuff too, we've created our own problem. We taught dealers to be like this. The dealer thinks when you're talking about specs that you mean the color of the truck and which seat it has. Because that's what most people seem to care about.
You're
they
right.
just walk in, they buy a truck because they like the color or they like the interior setup. And we have trained dealers over the years to cater to what people want. And the person who comes in with a list of specs like you did, you're the 1%er in this case.
Is that?
or less than that, maybe.
Yeah, right.
So, yeah.
Well, I'm even
even
so picky that I carry so much stuff with me. I even spec a right-hand sleeper box door.
There you go.
I won't have a truck without the access to the right-hand sleeper just to put shit in. And 5 trucks he sent me the other day to look at, I said, well, none of them have a right-hand sleeper door. He said, well, no, they don't even make that anymore. I said, well, I see trucks going down the road with it on there, so why do you tell me they don't make it anymore?
That's terrible, too. What's funny is on the market, things that should make the truck less valuable tend to make them more valuable, and they sell quicker, which is crazy. But like if the wrong gear ratio and too long of a wheelbase, they'll sell that in a heartbeat.
Yep.
One that's
correct.
A nice short wheelbase that you can tuck the trailer in tight and be good and efficient. They have a heck of a time moving it.
You know, the other thing that shocked me was that the resale price on the used market of the classics keeps going up. And I kept thinking, why is that? I'm not really understanding why that would keep happening. And it got really bad during that crazy price climb, but I still see it. I mean, I saw, what did I see the other day? A classic, it was a glider. Had like 700,000 miles on it. It was selling for like $105,000. Like, that's insane. I could buy 3 trucks with that many miles on it. But here's what, it finally dawned on me. I should just listen to my own, when I tell people why things are priced a certain way, they don't build as many anymore. There's not as many of them left to be on the used market. So like everything else, it's supply and demand.
Yeah, and it's funny how many of those classics I'm starting to see stacked up heading to Mexico with where I live. The other part of that is, so the dealer is going to take the truck for trade. If they can't sell it when it's the correct spec, the second time around, that puts a disincentive against it.
Right.
So,
right, which all of this,
I mean,
even though it sounds like we're complaining about it, it's actually good for us. I mean, this is just an indication that even though we just went through this time where about the only way to survive this down market was to have some control over your cost, we still don't see many people focusing on cost. It just makes it easier for us.
Well,
Well, because they're smart enough to get a hell of a freight rate, and fuel prices don't matter. It don't matter. They're getting too big a freight rate. You know, that $5 or $6 a mile,
Sure.
they're still getting them classic trucks. Like,
Sure they are.
hell, they're making a fortune.
Sure they are. 'Cause
Laughing at us.
we all know every shipper in the country is willing to pay more if you pull in with a classic, right?
well, yeah, that's
Right,
what I always
exactly.
do. When I'd call a customer and they'd say, "Do you have an aerodynamic truck or do you have a classic style truck?" And yeah, they wanted me to go cheaper right away because I was aero.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, you did great. So,
Good.
well, that answered the question, Henry. I'll keep looking, but I just wanted to get that final ratio mainly and go from there. So,
You private
Right.
message me. I know we're quite.
all right, I may do that if I get time, if I can figure it out. So,
All right, Jerry.
Not all
Thanks.
the way to the 6x2.
Thanks for the
but
call.
back.
We before we move on, we got a couple more calls I want to get to. Henry, how about this for irony? So I'm still getting reports in of outages. Now, originally this was being called a Microsoft outage. Then I started seeing this morning a company called CrowdStrike. It seems to be their software. So I'm not sure why it was being reported as Microsoft. Now it's CrowdStrike. I don't know if they have something to do with each other. Maybe there's two outages. I'm not sure yet. But I follow a couple that does really specialized heavy haul stuff. And they just posted the CrowdStrike outage is even affecting permits. So they need permits for this load they're moving, and they can't get permits because of the outage. But then the interesting thing is, they have one of those like prefabbed buildings on their trailer, like a utility building kind of thing. It turns out it's a Microsoft building for their AI setup. How ironic. We can't move the Microsoft building because Microsoft software is down and we can't get permits.
That's something else.
Yeah.
You think somewhere and especially when you get to medical and everything else, you think that there would be some level of redundancy in, the old pencil and paper.
Well, and
Because,
there is. In most cases, there is a backup, but now we're looking at systems that we haven't really thought about a backup. The one that surprised me at the hospitals was you have to break down ICU doors to get to the patient because the door's locked over this. And we should have had a backup system there, but I'll also tell you this. When you start talking about these complicated management systems that they went after with the car dealers, your only backup is pencil and paper. You can't run two giant systems and say, oh, well, we'll just flip over to the other one. It's just not possible to have a backup to that entire system. These companies have multiple redundant backups, just like we do. Our software rides on a server somewhere. And we have multiple redundant servers around the world. We pay to make sure we have some backup to these things. And there are times where our stuff still goes down. But sometimes you just can't have a backup. It's just too big and too massive to have any kind of a backup other than pencil and paper. And now think about if we could run our operation on pencil and paper all day. We can't anymore. When we used to do that, think about it. But car dealers used to have a lot more employees. Everybody used to have a lot more employees. You used to have an entire pool of secretaries who were typing things and copying things. And all those people are gone because we depend on the technology. Wait till AI gets even bigger than it is now. Because I can tell you, in a lot of businesses, AI is already replacing people. One AI system in certain companies can replace 10 people who write copy because AI is really good at writing copy. So not only did the first round of technology and computers and the internet get rid of people, AI is getting rid of more people. So if your backup is manual, you just don't have the people to do it.
Well, now you're getting me into my conspiracies that bothered me a lot. That in the end, does all the technology spell the end for us? But that's a whole other story.
Well,
And
I've
and
talked
notice
about
I
that
picked
with
pencil,
AI.
not pen. The reason I picked a pencil instead of a pen, even if you shut off gravity, it works.
That's right. Yeah, I have a joke about that, but we'll move on because we have some calls. Let's go to Ohio. Tom, welcome.
Yeah, hey Kevin, good morning. CrowdStrike is the security system for all these big tech companies and stuff. So this is just from a security update, from what I understand, and it's wreaking havoc like this. Can you imagine what would happen if somebody actually targeted, let's say, I'm not sure who the predominant software or security company is for like logistics, but if they hit, I'm sure C.H. Robinson's probably running the same type of stuff that Old Dominion's running.
Exactly. Right.
But if we were to run into that problem where because everything's computerized now, of course. So when we go to a shipper, if they can't access their loads, they don't know what to ship. Nothing, you know what I mean?
No.
So then what happens?
That's what I mean. We have built these bigger and bigger systems that now, there are industries where 90% of the companies in that industry use the same software.
That's what I'm saying.
Right.
Yeah. So
right.
if the one that logistics is.
Yeah, logistics is a target. It absolutely will be. Now they're saying this was just a coding error, but it could. They're making it a point to say it wasn't a cyber attack. Well, two things. I get that, but a cyber attack could certainly do this. So we just need to keep that in mind. And I'm not sure that they're not lying to us. It may be, hey, we don't want widespread panic.
Don't forget that. Yeah, don't forget the fact that we don't believe a word that they say nowadays.
Right.
There's that. But I had a bunch of different things. This is supposed to be just a 3-day maximum deal. When I heard this happened, I had I was half on my fuel, so I went to Flying J. When I went to Flying J, I was able to fuel up. When I was walking out, though, I went to use my coffee on my points, but they couldn't take the points. So anybody that's got less than half a tank of fuel, I just highly recommend you go get fuel just in case. Not going to hurt. You're going to use it anyway. But what happens when they hit the big three fuel stations? This eventually is going to get ugly.
Or like I said, hit the banking system, and so many people are now dependent on credit cards only. That's why I say carry cash. Have some cash for an emergency, because if the banking system goes down and all you have is a credit card, you can't buy anything. No food, no water, no
right.
fuel, no. You can't get a hotel room. You can't get a rental car. You're just screwed.
Yeah, we talked about being prepared before, and then when they said, who I think's doing this is the brokers. I think it's the brokers.
Of course they are.
Which was I haven't heard from Tony for a while, and so that's when Jerry was talking about the brokers. I thought, well, I haven't heard from Tony. Hope he's doing okay.
Yeah.
And then another thing about Jerry, when he's searching truck paper. Don't just put in 6x2, put in 6 times 2, and then put in 6 by, like BY 2, and spell it differently, because the search results will come up differently depending on the clown that entered it. So most likely he used the X for the buy. You know what I mean?
Right.
But a lot of those search engines don't differentiate the difference between them. You know?
Right.
So there's that. And yeah, there was one more thing, but it's escaping me right now. So okay, well, I guess that's all I got because I have CRS today really bad.
All right. We will
Kevin?
talk to you again.
Kevin,
Yes.
on the subject you were saying about checking out the truck with different search words, it made me remember, especially with people looking for 6x2s, because there isn't a terrible big supply of them.
Right.
But anyway, a person I knew that asked me to help them somewhat with their truck after they got it. But they looked at the truck, bought the truck, and got it home before they realized it was a 6x2.
You're kidding
They
me.
didn't follow your list.
Oh,
No, I am not.
unbelievable.
And the worst part
I am
was,
getting two reports. One, the outage I spoke about with car dealers, CDK was the company. It wasn't just car dealers, truck dealers were also affected because they use the same kind of software. So I'm getting a report of somebody who worked at a Volvo dealer, and they were down for a week. They had to come up with workarounds for an entire week over that. I'm getting a report that this outage has affected fuel at a pilot location, at least one, and usually figure if it affected one, it's probably affecting more. I don't know how bad this one is going to be. We don't know yet. There's still a lot of stuff coming in. We don't know how long this is going to last. Think about this. Have you ever watched one of those maps of all the planes that are up in the air at any given time?
yeah,
Like they'll show a picture of the United States, and then you have a little airplane icon, and you see them and where they're going and the route. And you can't see the map of the United States because it is totally covered by airplane icons. That's how many flights are going on all the time. And this is worldwide.
well, yeah.
It's not just the United States.
Just look at.
What's that? So when you start to think about how bad this could get, so now people today are not able to fly. So somebody who wanted to go on vacation or on a business trip didn't make it there today. Somebody who was on a vacation or a business trip didn't make it home today. Now, once you back up one flight, it affects another flight because that plane needs to be used somewhere else after this flight. And every gate, you might have Southwest isn't having a problem today, but if they can't get into a gate because American Airlines can't move out of the gate, now when this goes on for multiple days, think about it. If I were going on a business trip today and I can't go, well, then I'm going to try to go tomorrow. And if I can't go then, I'm going to try to go Sunday, and I'm going to try to go Monday. And there's two more people behind me that need to go on Sunday and Monday. And you start thinking about the backup of this and how long it's going to take for everybody to get where they need to go once we clear this. What a nightmare.
What still to me is amazing, going back to 9/11, that they managed to get all those planes on the ground that fast.
Yeah. No, I remember that day well. I had a business partner who was on a plane that day. I got back the day before from the Dallas Truck Show. That happened right after the Dallas Truck Show. Now, the truck show ended on a Saturday, but I stayed over. I think it was a Monday, wasn't it? Or a Tuesday? I think it was a Tuesday. I stayed over till Monday because back then I used to do a lot of tax returns, and it was the second extension deadline. And while I was at the truck show, I just took a bunch of tax returns with me, and I was just working on them in the hotel room because it was quiet. So I stayed a couple extra days. I made it out the day before it happened, but my business partner was waiting in Florida. So when I got back, he left, and he got to Atlanta on his connecting flight, and that's when they shut everything down. And he ended up renting a car and driving home from Atlanta to Orlando.
Yeah, I had a truck that was supposed to be delivering right across the river from it, but fortunately they had a fuel line break that night. And I was delivering to the turnpike entrance at the bottom of New Jersey, and then had to go to down by the Pentagon. I got to see a lot of it that day.
Oh, yeah, I'll
was
bet.
crazy. But,
Holy cow.
and I was up around them, and suddenly there was no planes in the sky other than jet fighters down on the deck.
Right. Yeah. All right, let's go back to the phones. Let's go to Alabama. Matt, welcome.
Good morning. Yeah, it was Monday the 10th, Tuesday the 11th, because I had just picked up on Monday afternoon my brand new Peterbilt that I drove for 15 years.
Oh, wow.
And I bought it down in Kansas.
Yeah.
And was driving home Tuesday morning when I heard it on the radio.
Yeah. You know, that's one of those events we've talked about before, that when it occurs and you're an adult, it's one of those things you always remember where you were and what was going on. And we just had another one, right? I mean, who's going to forget where they were when they tried to assassinate Trump?
Yep. So earlier you were talking about freight rates versus the style of truck you drive.
Yeah.
You do know Peterbilt slogan, don't you?
No.
Class pays.
So they're the one that's perpetuated that myth all these years.
Yes, they have.
Yeah.
That's been their slogan. I guess I don't know when it started, but I would assume at least the early 90s, if not sooner.
Interesting.
I think that started back in the 70s or 80s.
You know, speaking of that, this is totally off topic, but you just reminded me of something. We started talking, what was the year of the electric and autonomous vehicles? Was it like 2017, I'm thinking, when we were just talking about all of that? You know, when are we going to get our first electric vehicle? Who's doing autonomous? I can remember a year where it was a big topic. We were talking about it all the time.
I would guess somewhere in there, because wasn't Tesla's truck supposed to come out in like 2020, and it was like 3 years before that they had announced. So.
I think so. So we were talking, and here's my point. I kind of got fed up with this yesterday, and I posted it. Look, I've worked with Overdrive magazine since 1999. Overdrive was the first company that put me on stage doing a seminar. I've talked about it, the Overdrive Partners in Business. I still occasionally do that. The program's still around. I wrote for 3 different magazines owned by Randall Riley. I know people over there still, but I blasted them the other day. I mean, I really blasted them. I'm so tired of the fact that we're 7 years into this now, and you can't get any details about these trucks. You can't get weight half the time. You can't get what their fuel consumption is and what the cost of these fuels are. All we keep seeing are these fluff pieces. And I saw another one the other day. It was about Peterbilt's Hydrogen 579. I talked a little bit about it, but it wasn't a technical article at all. All they did, I think, was take the marketing piece from Peterbilt, and somebody drove the truck. And honestly, the reporting sounded like a third grader's book report. There was a sentence in there, I should probably go find it, but it was something like, well, yeah, this thing gets kind of like something like 800 miles range or something like that. Well, come on. So I blasted it saying, come on, could we get some actual details, and could we get somebody who could write a technical article instead of this? And the response was, well, it was never meant to be a technical article. It was just a test ride, and we were doing a video about. Well, I get that. I'm tired of the fluff stuff. 7 years into this, tell me what these trucks actually do. Tell us how they're built. I don't even know how many electric engines, or what hydrogen system, or what does it weigh? What is hydrogen going to cost? Give us some details instead of all this fluff.
And now ammonia is coming into the scene.
Oh, please. Yeah, just what we need. One more alternative fuel that they're not going to tell us anything about. So I pissed off some people over at Overdrive because I was very vocal about it, and they're not very happy. And they're, well, it wasn't really supposed to be a technical piece. I know. Write a technical piece for us once. Give us some details about these things. That's my rant for the day.
Well, you're good at pissing people off.
I
So.
know. I
Yep.
know. Even friends. Like I said, I work with all those people, but I finally just got tired of it.
Yep.
With all them
agree.
thrown in, I was having flashbacks to the Valley Girls.
Yeah. That's what it sounded like. The writing was awful. Come on, use AI. Seriously, just use AI. It'll fix all that for you. What else you got, Matt? Before I go off
Jerry,
on some other rant.
stole my thunder a little bit. I knew right away when Henry started talking the 1156, 1157 bulb, because I still run a lot of older equipment, farm stuff, and all that. That those are still common.
Well,
to me,
you know what?
Right.
What's funny, even on incandescent bulbs, and I have some of them that are plug-in incandescents that are my turn signals on my trailer. My trailer is an 08, has over 2 million miles on it, and all but 2 bulbs on it are original.
Yeah, that's wild.
You wouldn't, that would not have happened back in the day.
Oh, no. You used to carry, I used to carry boxes of bulbs around because you were always replacing them.
Bulbs, wires, connections.
Well,
yeah, it's even all original wiring harness.
Let's talk about something else since we're back to that. Not only did the same bulb work in almost every car you owned, all of them were really simple to replace. I'm trying to remember what vehicle I had.
Come on.
What?
If the spring rusted in the bottom of them or the collar, if they got water in them, got rusty at all?
That was a problem. Yeah. But I mean,
and then
now...
And you had to put something next to it to wedge the bulb to get a better ground?
Yeah,
Come on.
now, if I remember right, somebody hit my tail light on the FJ, broke the housing or something, so I had to replace the housing. And I swear I had to buy 3 specialty tools and contort myself and get in there upside down and reach around back with my left hand, and it took me like 4 hours to get the old housing out.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah. The good news is if you're replacing a housing, usually you end up breaking the little plastic tabs that hold it in.
You're right.
The first time you take something apart.
Yeah.
So then you have to replace it.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, just to change a bulb, you got to remove that whole thing nowadays to change the bulb inside there, and then the clips or something, plastic always breaks, at least that's my luck anyway.
And every vehicle is completely different. Like it used to be that almost all vehicles, not only the same bulb, it was the same housing. They were all, you knew how to take them apart and work on them. Now you look at it, you go, hell, I don't even know how to find where the housing is.
Yep. That's the big thing that I don't miss on the old lights, though. Because remember the clearance lights that you had to pry the lens off of them, then hope it didn't crack if it was winter.
Right.
And then there was just some little metal terminals that it rubbed against inside, and there was nothing quality about that.
Yeah, Matt, what else you got?
Yeah, this is where we need Joel and talking about the good old days and how much simpler things were.
Yeah.
You spend twice as much time working on everything.
Exactly. No, I know. And you replace these things a lot more than you have to now. And it's a good thing, because if you had to replace these things as often as we used to, and now it's so much more, I don't think I'd own a vehicle. Or I'd certainly pay somebody else to fix it.
It's funny, Kevin. I just had somebody, I was on a conference call that was going over air conditioning. And trust me, this guy will forget more about air conditioning than most people will ever know. But apparently he had gone to help out at a tech school. And with these newer people coming in to tech schools, he said, you don't realize, he found out from the instructor, when we were kids, we were playing with stuff like you talked about your Honda. I was trying to figure out how to make my push mower run on kerosene because I thought it'd make more power so it wouldn't bog down in the grass. But we knew which way to turn a screwdriver. We knew a Phillips screwdriver. We knew which way to turn a bolt as a general rule, right?
Right.
And he said when they come into the tools, the majority of them, they got to start out with, this is a flathead screwdriver. This is a Phillips screwdriver. To tighten a screw, you turn to the right or clockwise. And you got to be careful on clockwise because some of them don't know which way the clock goes.
Well, why would they? No, seriously, why counterclockwise and clockwise is not a good description anymore because we don't have enough clocks like that around that people understand that. You got to go back to the one that used to drive me crazy because I always used clockwise and counterclockwise. And every time I heard somebody say lefty, loosey, righty, tighty, it was like nails on a chalkboard. But that's, I mean...
Oh, yeah.
Me too, yep.
I just hate that phrase. It drives me nuts. But that's about what you have to do now.
There's only one I hate more than that of the righty-tighty, lefty-loosey is when they just grab the wrench and yank into it real hard both directions just to see which way it's going to go.
Well, it's funny we're talking about this because I just had an experience the other day. I was using a weed whacker and the head went flying off. The whole head just came off. So I'm like, well, I didn't even realize it was loose. So I'm trying for probably about 5 minutes, which is a long time, to screw the head back on. And it's really simple. There's a big stud right there with threads, and it goes right on it. And I can't get this thing started for anything. And I'm like, what is wrong with this? And then it dawned on me, hey, this thing spins. Maybe it's a left-hand thread. But it's been so long since it took me a little while. But yeah, as soon as I realized it's probably a left-hand thread, then I was fine.
Do you remember when Chrysler Corporation used the left-hand threads on one side of the car and right-hand threads on the other side?
No. I don't think I ever
They did that in the season. That was a big deal.
I don't think I ever owned a Mopar product.
Well, it was actually over-engineered from that standpoint because I forget which way it was, but because of the rotation of the tire, it would not make a lug nut if it got loose to vibrate loose. There was a reason behind it, but
no, that wouldn't. I could see that, I guess, but you're right. It's a little overcomplicated.
Well, with impact wrenches, which were becoming much more common at all the tires, a lot of those studs got broke off on the one.
Since we're complaining about all this stuff, here was one of the most frustrating things, and I've talked about this before. I was around when we attempted to switch to the metric system, and we failed, and we gave up, so half of our stuff ended up being on the metric system, and half is still on the old English system. But I can remember when
soda bottle.
You had to start deciding, is that a half inch or is it a 10 millimeter? And now you had to have both sets of sockets and both sets of wrenches. And that was always fun too, because most of the time I can look at a nut or a bolt and be pretty good at knowing what size it is, but it's easy to miss if you don't know whether it's American or metric.
Well, it was odd. I had a 2000 Chevrolet pickup truck, and the lug nuts were metric and the threads were SAE. Also had a Toyota Camry, and on it, the threads were metric, but the heads on the bolt were SAE.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like,
I
was like,
bought a
pick one.
hydraulic hose here. The exact same thing. It was the threads were SAE, but then you needed a metric wrench to tighten it down.
That's just wrong. Yeah.
I just ran into a bolt like that on my Jeep.
Yeah, so in at least farm equipment, a 15 millimeter and an 18 millimeter will cover almost everything.
There you go.
A large percentage.
Yeah.
This happened to be a 16 millimeter.
No way.
It wasn't even a common one.
You're right. All right, let's move on.
Anyway,
in that conversion to metric. Go ahead.
Okay. So yeah, the reason I called when you talked about our cell phones and they're all in our hand every day and we depend on them,
Yeah.
and then what's going to happen when the system goes down? Well, there's satellite phones that are much more reliable for something like that.
Right.
I just listened to a podcast this week, and it's a hunting podcast. Let me pull up the exact number. It's a polar bear hunt. So
Okay.
the name of the podcast is The Big Game Hunting Podcast.
All right.
Let's see, episode 323, July 11th. And the title of it is Rescued from an Iceberg in the Arctic Ocean on a Polar Bear Hunt. So the story is the guy is from Texas, flew up, and Canadian guides, they go way up and they're wherever they can get to with snowmobiles, and then they camp and they tent, and they're out on the ice, out on the Arctic Ocean. Well, overnight it was a windstorm and the ice broke free, and it's huge. I mean, we're talking half or a square mile of ice, so
Right.
It wasn't like they were in danger.
Right.
But they're floating out into the ocean.
Yeah.
The guide, Canadian company, has sat phones and wouldn't work to call for a helicopter.
Right.
And luckily, this hunter from Texas, he had bought his own, or had one originally, and had taken it with him. His worked.
Ah.
And that's all in the story they go on to. Now, after the story's done, the host, he goes into the details on that. He says he asked about that. The Canadian system only works within 12 miles of their shoreline for satellite phones.
You're kidding me.
If you buy a Canadian satellite phone, well, they had drifted over 12 miles from coast.
Ah.
Well, I mean, they were probably
Right.
several miles off of the coast to begin with and then drifted. So, yeah, luckily his American phone works anywhere in the world.
So here's where I think we might be headed on this, because there's been some hints. So, Elon has been making huge improvements in Starlink. So I've talked about this before. The Starlink satellite dish is already really small and really simple compared to what I used to have to deal with when I had satellite to travel. Got the first dish I bought to put on the RV to get internet by satellite. By the time I bought the dish and had it installed, and David Counts did the installation down in his place for me, I was into the dish alone for about $15,000. That's what it cost me to get the dish and get it up on the top. The service was like $300 and some a month, and it was horribly slow, and I was limited to 250 megabytes a day of data. If I went over 250 megabytes, it would slow down so much it wasn't even usable. The good news was I only used it for upload to get my show up to the satellite, and they only dinged you on download. And I didn't really need to use it for download, so I never had to worry about the limits. But if you had, I mean, my God, you'd check your email and you'd run out of limits in a day. It was so bad.
Oh.
And when you parked, it probably took it on average about 20 minutes to find the satellite and lock onto it. And if the wind would blow too hard, it would move the coach just enough that you'd lose the connection. Now, with Starlink, the dish is $500, not $15,000. It is super light and small, tiny. I can carry it around, put it anywhere I want. It locks onto a satellite in a couple of minutes, and I can pick it up and move it around, and it doesn't lose its signal. We have come so far on that, but where he's going, and he's already testing it, he's already done it. He is working on a system where you bypass all of this stuff and you'll get the satellite signal on your phone. He's already done it with what they claimed, I believe, was a stock. I don't remember if they were using an iPhone or an Android, but he has already posted a post on X, and he said, I made this post directly from my phone to a satellite. Nothing in between, no dish, no routers, no nothing. And you start thinking about it, what would stop Elon Musk from making a phone right now? And I'm sure it would be a hell of a phone. And it connects to his Starlink satellites. That's now your calling and your internet. Why do we need AT&T and Verizon?
Well, and he is concerned about the security on phones.
Correct.
Isn't it something with the new iPhone, something in their security agreements, he won't allow any employees into SpaceX with that phone into secured areas?
They are saying that their iPhone is going to put the AI directly on the phone. Whereas now people say, I already have AI on my phone. No, you don't. You have apps that allow you to connect to a server somewhere on the internet that's running the AI. This AI will be on your phone. And Elon said, that's way too dangerous. You're not bringing those phones into our buildings.
Yeah. This story, I think it's well over 10 years old. I don't remember. They told what year it was, 2012-ish. So
yeah.
That may not be true anymore with Canadian service
satellite phones have come a long way. There are some satellite phones out there you can buy now fairly inexpensively, and you buy a really cheap service plan that you would only use it for emergencies anyway. I've considered getting a couple for when I travel.
I'm going to get
Well, I haven't looked in years, but they were so pricey at one point in time that
it was just out of the question.
Assuming that's coming down.
It really has, and I haven't looked at it in probably 2 years, but I've been thinking more and more about it because I have travel coming up again. We look at something like this where worldwide planes are grounded. This could go on for a week. I don't know. So I'm thinking if I'm going to be traveling again, I may just get a couple, have one at the house, and I'll take one with me.
Yeah. So just a little more interesting about that story. If anybody wants to go listen to it, it is a good one. But so when they finally do get a hold of the Canadian, I guess I don't know what their terminology is, but for us it'd be like the Coast Guard.
Yeah.
And they're trying to get a helicopter. They're obviously already way remote up in the Arctic, and because they were so far off ashore, most of the helicopters could not go get them. Not because they didn't have the capability. There is a law that once you get over the ocean, you have to have a certain size fuel tank on a helicopter. And most of the local ones didn't have a large enough fuel tank to go out over the ocean. So it ended up being, it was a whole day they drifted, and before one of the gold mines or somebody up there had a helicopter that could actually come to them.
Speaking of remote in the Arctic Circle, is anybody watching this season alone?
No.
No? I think we're up to day, I watched last night, I think we're up to day 16 that they're out there now. They're in the Arctic Circle. That's how far north they went this time. So this one will be, the cool thing about this one is everybody's getting a lot of food. Usually their biggest struggle is food. The biggest struggle here is going to be when winter sets in. It's just going to be brutal. But last night on the episode, some guy got a moose. 1,200-pound moose with a simple bow. That was pretty impressive. Now the challenge is...
They've hunted them that way for thousands of years.
I know. But how many people have the skill to be able to do that today? Not many.
Not me.
Yeah, not me either. 1,200 pounds. Now his biggest problem is, and you think about this, why it was so hard for us to survive in the wild. Now he has to figure out how does he process and preserve all that food and keep, there's I don't know, they said there's 5,000 grizzly bears in this area, wherever they are. And wolves. and everybody wants the meat. And you know what they want? It's so funny again to watch this. He's building caches everywhere and cold storage, and he's trying to process all this meat. Now, the good thing is, normally they work so hard to try to control energy and conserve energy. You know, they don't want to work too hard. If you have to work too hard, you're just burning calories that you can't replace. He doesn't have to worry about that. Now he's got plenty of meat. He can just eat and work, and that's all he's doing. But it is incredible to watch what he's got to go through to try to figure out how he's going to save. It's not cold enough yet. It's still getting to like into the 50s during the day. So he's got to figure out how he's going to preserve all this. And the other animals are starting to get into his caches, and he's building these incredibly complicated storage things. But every animal that gets in, they immediately go after all the fat. And he's freaking out because he knows he needs all that fat.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, grizzly bears and wolves don't make good dinner guests.
No, not at all. You know, he
I had that scare on my moose hunt many years way up in British Columbia is where I went moose hunting.
Yeah.
And right before dusk is when I shot the moose. So by the time we're done gutting it out and heading back, it's already dark.
Right.
And as we're walking through the woods in the dark, we hear a tree branch break. And my guide goes, we're covered in blood. That could be a grizzly.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this guy is.
You want to talk about going from, just walking around in the woods to all of a sudden being alert on everything possible.
So imagine.
Which it wasn't.
Imagine
it was
that
actually another
scenario.
hunter coming.
Imagine that same scenario, but now you're alone. You just got done gutting, skinning, and quartering a 1,200-pound moose, and he had to carry the meat. It was a mile round trip back to his camp where he had already started building some storage. A mile round trip. Do you know how many trips you have to make to carry out? And he would take a leg quarter, and they said the leg quarter had to be close to 100 pounds. And he had it up on his shoulder, walking through the woods, and he's got blood all over him, and he's carrying a 100-pound leg. Yeah, you don't want to run into a grizzly right then. I can't imagine what that. And you're alone. That's the whole point of the show. You're just alone. I can't imagine what that's got to be like.
Yeah,
and
there had to be 5 or 6 of us that packed my moose out, and we didn't even have to go that far to get to a forest road.
Right.
But
and imagine
that's
this.
a lot to carry.
You also had high-powered rifles, right? So that's what you shot the moose with.
Yep.
He's got a simple bow. That's it. Yeah. Whew. But it's a good season this year. So it's an interesting one.
Yeah.
All right, Matt, we're going to cut you
loose. I
loose.
had more, but I already forgot about it, so I'll let you move along.
All right, thanks. Let's go to Pennsylvania. Charlie, welcome.
Hey, can you hear me?
We can. What's on your mind today?
Hello? Looking to buy a used truck, and I was looking at the Maverick trucks, and I was wanting to talk to Albert Henry about the specs on those. They had the DD13 with the D12 and 228 rear ends.
With the 13-liter, the 228 is a pretty nice combination.
Okay. I won't have any problem with power. I haul a OTR tanker, chemical tanker.
What's your percentage empty?
At least 25%.
Hey,
all right.
Charlie?
Well, your operation would be very similar to how Maverick would have been with their used spec, right? And is it going to be a rocket ship? No. But are you going to be able to get it? But they're putting it together for efficiency. It obviously worked for them because last I saw, Maverick's growing. Their terminal looks pretty nice. I just drove by it the other day.
Charlie?
So,
Have you
And
have you ever owned or
Well,
driven a 12.7 Detroit?
no.
Really? Okay. About the most
Same
common
thing,
diesel engine on the planet. Really, I'm always shocked when we think we hear a 13-liter Cat, or a 13-liter Detroit now, or a 13-liter Volvo, and we think of them as small engines. But the most popular engine,
Well,
I would have to guess that there were more 12.7s put in all trucks than any other engine during my lifetime. And it was a 12.7, but we never said that's a small engine.
well, there was people at the time, but what the biggest
I was
difference
worried
now
about
is,
the
Kev,
228.
that they're gearing them so much taller. What you're going to notice is, and it does the shifting on its own, so it's not going to stay in high gear as long on a hill. So, but why did you need to be geared that way when you're on the flat ground? So it'll work. Just know that when you're, if you, the best way to put it, when you gear, you've ridden a bicycle before, right?
Yeah.
And we'll say you're of my age that 10 gears were enough. We didn't need 21 or 28 or whatever they're putting on them now. But if you were in seventh gear, you could accelerate pretty quick. You could slow down. You could accelerate again, right? When you're driving with a 228 or a 216 or 203 overall, like I am, or God, wherever Joe is, when you're in high gear, it really likes a steady hand on the throttle. Because if you're trying to accelerate and slow down a lot when you're geared that tall, it's not what it's meant to do. So you're driving a super speedway truck instead of a short track truck. Does that make sense?
Well, I'm driving 58 right now on I-80, and very comfortable with that.
Yeah, it'll be fine. It's not a matter of speed. It's just when it starts pulling the hill in high gear, it'll shift down a gear. So what? And you're good.
Yeah, just like I just did. I'm down at ninth right now.
Yep.
All right. Yeah,
Yep.
this spec'd out pretty good over there. I mean,
Yeah, well, they got some of them, and the mid roofs are spec'd really good to be a flatbed or a tanker. They got some raised roofs that would make good dry vans, and that dealership group also has some other fleets they're dealing with, and they seem to be, of any that I see in the used market, having the right wheelbase and gear ratios that would be palatable in the used market in volumes that I don't normally see.
okay, that's what I needed to know. Yeah, because he was talking about on the torque side that they were at 1750 at 1700 RPM.
No, it's 1750 at 900 RPM or 950, somewhere down there.
Okay, so I was wondering about that.
Yeah, the horsepower is up at the higher RPM. The torque is down at the lower RPM. But
Okay.
I know it was a 6x2, which this one wasn't. And I helped a guy put one of them together for a reefer that was loaded both ways.
Yeah.
And now he had all the aerodynamics and all. And he was a 62 mile an hour kind of guy. But his fuel
Yeah.
mileage always was right on top of 10. And he didn't have empty miles at all. Now you're pulling a tanker, which for some reason I always want to mess with a tanker because it seems like it could be really aerodynamic, but they really aren't.
They are not.
But it looks like they should be. I'd really like to play with a tanker because there's got to be a lot of room to be doing something
Well,
there.
you got those four fenders hanging out there. They're like wings, whatever.
Yeah.
And I got ladders, I got dams, I got all kinds of stuff.
The front fenders don't even make sense to me that they have them. They should be on the truck. But yeah.
Well, we have both.
Yeah, oh, yeah. Because what's better than two parachutes? Four, right?
Well, that's what we got.
Yeah.
And and I don't haul the same tank every day, so sometimes I got dually, sometimes I got super singles. It changes all the time with this.
Right.
So.
But yeah, the general spec. I mean, You know what Maverick does? They're not hauling lightweight stuff. You see them with shingles, you see them with glass, you see them steel. You know, it's not like they're lightweighting their way around, right?
No, they haul a lot of glass. Yeah, what happens with a tanker though, when you're going uphill, everything goes to the rear. So you hope that when you're hauling, that it's full. You know.
Get a hold of me on private message. I had a person that it was a little bit of an adaptation to them and they were doing unbaffled tanker, and
That's all I do.
well, anyway, this particular person got really good at driving with a tanker with an automated manual without having to put it in manual.
Well, that's all I do right now.
All right, very good. I know there's an art to that, and I'm not a smoothbore tanker guy. I understand the principle, but it's not something I do.
On the transmission, if I guess they got to put an adapter for our PTOs for my product and air pump.
Yeah,
Do you know anything about that?
I just know that they can.
Okay. All right. Okay.
I know there's a provision for it to have a PTO put on it.
Okay. Now you've got the park air. What do they
The
call
Park,
that?
what's referred to as the Park Smart, but it's now called the dual HVAC system. Yes.
Okay. Well, the Park. I guess it's Park Smart on these because it's a 21 or a 22.
No, it would be dual HVAC by them, but that's okay. It's still the basic same thing.
Okay. And what the engine comes on when it's needed
No,
automatically? Okay. Tell me.
sorta, kinda. So, first of all, if it's the ones I think it has, it'll be a diesel-fired heater for the winter and battery power on the air conditioning. But you can turn it on to comfort mode that if it can't keep up, the engine will start. Well, I had one of them. I never put it that the engine would start because if the engine would start, it was usually in the last hour right when I was getting up anyway. And if I properly managed my batteries, it didn't need to start.
Yeah.
You know,
Okay.
now I had to do things like you didn't expect it to make 10 hours with the windshield face towards the sun and trying to cool the whole truck. It's really just designed to cool the sleeper.
Correct.
And the curtains in the middle are insulated. Also, if I was going to run the microwave, I would just start up the engine during my microwave time because you're asking a lot out of it, right? So,
Right.
and then the other part is where people mess up is on the temperature control, dead center is right around 72 degrees.
Yeah.
And generally, I don't run the fan past 3, and I have it pre-cooled before I park. And I keep the temperature control dead center. A lot of times, I'll go to bed with the air conditioning on, and I'll wake up and the heat will be on because it got cold at night. It'll switch on its own.
Yeah.
So
Okay,
the other
cool.
thing on learning the operations of it, and if you get one of them, feel free to reach out to me, private message. We'll go through it. But also get the Freightliner Smart Source app.
Smart
on your
Force app.
Smart Source.
Okay.
And
All right.
excuse me. It'll have on the menu, it'll have training. Click on training. It'll have training by VIN number. You put in the last 6 of the VIN number of the truck you're in, and the training videos are for that exact truck, the way that truck was ordered, the way it was spec'd, the way the parameters are set up, and not for the one down the street from you.
Wow. That's
And-
fantastic.
And right now the videos are loading a little slow on it, so be patient with it. But things to pay attention to is how descent control works, IPM, along with many others that are in there.
Okay. Now that would be a good truck for. I guess Jerry called in earlier to make into a 6x2.
You could,
That truck.
but I know people that have done it. when you do a 6x2 from the factory, they make you run a 23,000-pound rear because they think you need a bigger ring and pinion. If you do it to that one, obviously it's a smaller ring and pinion. I know, Kevin, you've done that quite a bit, but
Yeah.
I don't know anybody done it working as hard as they do in tanker being heavy, though, all the time. That might make it a little bit different. Don't you think? Did we lose Kevin?
Nope. Sorry. I'm here.
Sleeping.
I'm trying to stay up to date on this because the news is coming in so fast. Now there's a conspiracy theory that Bill Gates did it all.
Hey, I couldn't get a hold of 2 of my credit cards this morning, two different ones.
Well, here's the most recent list I can find right now. 911 systems are down. Many emergency services and even home alarm systems are down. Governments are holding meetings around the world. News channels can't broadcast. Flights are grounded. Payment systems are not working. ATMs are down. Train stations are down. Casinos and hotels, people can't get in and out of their rooms. And the list just keeps getting longer.
Sounds like Terminator 3.
It's
before I forget about it, going back to the truck you're talking about with the ex-Maverick truck, I would say that it's probably spec'd out well enough, and if driven properly, that the mileage gain that you would get from converting that over to a 6x2, you would probably never get back out of it unless you happen to have a lift axle laying around and everything else, or somebody that wants to buy the other axle and the right combination of things to do that, because that truck should be able to get you pretty far up into the mileage to begin with, and the better you do, the less it helps. So you got to be really careful when you start getting these trucks that you're able to get up in the 8s and 9s. Getting yourself to 8.5 is not that big of a difference. It's not like going from 5 to 5.5.
All right. Well, you reconfirmed what I thought. And I'm glad for that. And if I can reach out to you sometime, that'd be great.
Yeah, feel free. I'm easy to find on Facebook.
all right. Thanks for the call, Charlie. We got to move along. Got to head off to Massachusetts. Brandon, welcome to the program.
Hey, Kevin, you were talking the other day about your John Deere mower blowing belts all the time.
Yeah.
I ran into the same problem. All of a sudden, one belt lasted 10 years, and then I was putting them on every, month or 3 mows.
Yeah.
And I believe they all switched to the Kevlar new technology, Kevlar belts. It's a bunch of junk wrapped in a canvas jacket, the belts.
Yeah.
And the OEMs have switched to that, and I could not find a real belt anywhere. And then I found a website called V-Belt Supply. One word, no dashes, V-Belt Supply.
Okay.
There's all the real old school belts. Just cut your crap off of that mower, measure it, and get something close, and you'll never have a problem again. And that goes for anybody with a new lawnmower. They all seem to be this new Kevlar junk that breaks on every tough mow.
If my blade strikes anything, a high spot on the ground, it breaks a belt. So I have to believe I've still got something wrong. I've rebuilt everything on the mower deck except the brakes, the blade brakes, and I haven't rebuilt those because I can't seem to find the right parts. I've ordered parts twice. They come in, they're the wrong parts. So I think I'm just going to have to find a John Deere dealer and just go down and hopefully find one of those good parts guys that can help me with this thing. But I just haven't had time to do it. But it's so sensitive to breaking belts. I have to believe I still have something wrong. Like you said, even with these
Kevin,
lousy belts, you might get a month. I can replace 2 belts in 1 day of mowing.
That gets pricey.
I thought the same thing. I ordered a brand new Cub Cadet 0-turn deck, and with the pulleys and with bearings and everything, I replaced everything. and still every time I'd run into a
okay.
tough patch of grass,
Yeah.
it would blow a belt.
Yeah. Well, maybe.
And once that new belt, that new real V belt went on,
Well, I'll try one.
it's over. You could smoke them. You can. I mean, if you get stalled at all with them Kevlar belts, it digs a hole and it's over. It's just right through the jacket. Once you hit anything, just try a V belt supply before you throw money at it. I threw the money at it. Just don't.
Yeah. No, I'm really
VBeltSupply.com.
down to the point where I was getting ready to buy a new mower deck because I don't know what else to do. But
Yep.
I've replaced, like
Trust
I said,
me,
everything. I'm going to
you'll
try
be amazed.
this. I'm going to order one before I get off the air today.
Yeah, and just so you know, I ordered one. It's called Cogged, COGED.
Okay.
That's just where some notches are missing, so it bends around pulleys better
okay.
or something.
Yeah.
I just ordered everything that might work,
Right.
and I can't remember if I got a Cogged one on or a regular one, but all my belt problems went away.
Well, I'm going to give it a shot then.
V-belt supply.
Yeah, I will do that. Thank you.
That's
Appreciate
it. That's all I got.
All right. Appreciate it. Let's go to Alabama. Paul, welcome.
Howdy.
What's on your mind today?
If Matt's still listening, we're not going to cross paths, but I'm going the other direction anyway. So.
All right.
The guy looking at the Maverick truck.
Yeah.
I've never seen one stuck on the side of the road halfway up a hill, not being able to make it.
That's right.
There you go, Paul.
That's right.
Yeah, they seem to make it up the hill.
That's what I noticed when I was at their terminal. All of them that went out with loads seemed to make it back there too.
Well, you know,
that's why they put all those gears in the transmission. You're allowed to use them.
I used to talk about this a lot in seminars and that kind of stuff. I haven't said this in a long time, but I used to go through this whole thing where when we switched from what was the weight limit before, like 72.8 or 73.8? 73.280. I knew it was some weird number like that. And we went to 80,000. At the time, a 300 horsepower engine was a big engine. There were still 190s running around. And I try to explain to people, I've been around the country many, many times over the years. None of the hills have gotten any bigger. They're all the same size as they were back then. And we used to pull.
Some of them have gotten less.
Yeah, right. So, you know, we did this with, at one point, they were doing this with naturally aspirated engines. And you know what? We got up the hill.
Yeah.
I don't want to go back to that, but I also, we don't need 700 horsepower. 5 is pretty darn efficient, and if it's matched to the torque right and gearing right, it's very pleasant to drive.
We could probably get by with less than 400. I was running that 400 1750, and you couldn't tell the difference between whether it was a 500 or whatever because you weren't usually up in them RPMs anyway.
All of my early Series 60s, like the DDEC 2, I think, may have been the first one I owned. Some of those were 330 horsepower.
Mine was a 360.
Yeah, for a while I had some
360 and 40.
Yeah, I had some 370, 420 splits, but I had some DDEC 2s that were just a straight 330 horsepower, I think.
And you got where you were going with them? No, that's not possible.
Yeah.
A friend of mine in Aussie drove a Kenworth fuel tanker towing a triple road train and a lot of miles on the dirt, and it had a 485 Cummins, and he was running at 220 or 250.
Yeah.
250,000 pounds.
Yeah.
Yeah, with a 485 Cummins.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So, I tried getting on fuel gauges today, Kevin, and it's not working.
Are you being serious or you're joking with me?
They're coming.
No, I cannot get on fuel gauges.
Let me.
Now I got to check that.
Yeah, let me send a message out to the team and see what we got going on with that.
I get on, Kevin. I've
just
You
did it.
can?
Maybe it's mine. I don't know.
Might be you then. I haven't
Yeah.
gotten any other reports, but I'll check into it.
One other comment. You talk about metric and imperial.
Yeah.
If you get a metric socket set where all the sockets are metric, 10, 11, 9 millimeters, 18 millimeters, everything.
Yeah.
Why does it still have a 1/2 inch or a 3/8 drive ratchet?
Paul, that's a really good question, but you need to be quiet.
Why wouldn't it have a 12?
That's a really good
Or not.
observation, but you should be quiet, because imagine how much more difficult it would be if we had to deal with different drive set sizes. Oh, what a nightmare. But that is
Paul,
weird.
Paul,
Yeah.
I'm going to hit you with another one. Why are all wheels around the world, for the most part, other than them TRX ones that Ford did back in the 70s or early 80s, the wheels are measured the diameter in inches, but the rest of it's in metric?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah,
that,
tires and wheels.
yeah. Oh, yeah, I can't even imagine what it would be like if we had a different drive size for all these sockets. Like, yeah. So,
Yeah,
but that is odd. You're right.
Just for those that are interested, a 22.5 would be a 571.5 millimeter rim. So, bit of trivia for you.
There you go. Thanks. I'm sure I'm going to remember that. We're going to move along. We might quit early today. I need a break, and it's the weekend. Let's go to Iowa. Rob, welcome to the program.
Hello, sir.
What's on your mind
I
today?
wanted to make a comment out here. I was out to the Walcott Truck Jamboree last week, and I was pleasantly surprised to meet Henry. He is nothing like I expected when you see people in person, and you listen to him, and I told him that, but his generosity and his outgoingness and his overall, how he talked to everybody. I sat there and watched him for a little while as well, as he let me sit in his truck as well, and he showed me the solar thing on his hood, which I thought that was, I listened to you guys' ideas quite a bit, and the other thing that I said to him, and I'll say to everyone, is, my gosh, the way he dressed up was just unreal. And he said he dresses like that every day.
Yes.
And
I
was
and
shocked.
he has for decades now.
Yeah. And he had a nice dress shirt on. He was all dressed up, and he had a really nice tie on. I thought and I made the comment to him, that's really old school stuff. You don't see that very often anymore. But I couldn't believe that he was letting people go up and sit in his truck. That really that just shows you how he is trying to help the industry.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
speaking of which,
thank you very much. And
it
was great meeting you there as well.
Interesting experience.
Yeah, it was great. That's all I had. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for the call. All right, that was our last calls. I will wait just a couple minutes to see if we get a couple more calls in, because I'll tell a quick story, and if not, we're going to wrap it up for today. The other day, I did a long show. We went right to the very end of the 3 hours, and I still had calls. I actually had to leave a couple because I had a podcast scheduled. I was on somebody else's podcast, so I had to meet their schedule right after. So I went from a long 3 hour show with no breaks to another hour plus on a podcast. But it was with David Owen at NASTIC. And when, David calls himself Mr. No Tech, he still has no cell phone and no computer. And he does not work on cell phones or computers ever. Still uses an office phone. If you don't get him on his office phone, you're not going to get him. So when we do a podcast, here's the way it works. And we're doing one every month now. He calls me up from his office phone. I answer on my cell phone. And when I answer, he says, all right, I'm hitting the record button. And we just start talking like it's a phone call, because we we've been talking a lot on the phone for the last, God, almost 2 years now. And every time we do, we'd say, you know what? We should have recorded that. That would make a good podcast. So he just started calling me and he hits record and we start talking and they turn it into a podcast. But he was in the middle of it and he said, hey, I need to go grab a donut and I'm going to go to the bathroom. Here, talk to this guy. And it was one of the people from Iowa 80. And Iowa 80 is I think David's fuel card might be the biggest single purchaser there at that stop. So he has a great relationship with them. So I ended up talking to one of the guys from Iowa 80. We may even think about doing some things together. I've never known anybody there. Obviously, I've been there many, many times, but I've never even thought about reaching out to him and doing anything together. But just happened to meet him there on the call. We had a great conversation. So who knows? We might be doing something there soon.
Yeah, Iowa 80 show was great this year, by the way. The Jamboree.
You know, I that's the one I miss going to. I used to go to a lot of truck shows. I think I used to do about 6 a year at one point. That being one of them. That one was always one of my favorite. It's so much more casual. Setup is easy. It's outside, which is really nice being outside. And you know that show has a history of crazy weather. Like I can remember being there one day where it's just absolutely the perfect summer day, and the next day you're watching everybody's stuff float down a river right through the middle of the whole show. It's raining so hard.
What are you talking about? That can happen on the same day.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right.
You don't
right. Yeah, it doesn't have to be the next day.
You don't have to wait for the next day.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, so I kind of missed that one. That was really casual, laid back. You just get to kind of hang out, and it's not so jam packed like a Louisville might be, where you got a line of people the whole time waiting, and you feel like you got to kind of rush through. It's a lot more casual. You get to spend more time with people. I kind of missed that one.
The weirdest part about that show is the busiest part of the show for me often is after the show hours, because it's at a truck stop and people keep walking over and they have the concert at night.
Right.
I mean, it's nothing there at 9 o'clock in the morning and you don't get out of there till 10, 11 o'clock and you still have people.
Yeah. You know what was probably my favorite truck show, but it only happened for 2 years. It was in your neck of the woods.
Which one's that?
Randall Riley. Overdrive did a truck show there in North Carolina there was a drag strip there.
Oh, that's not woods anymore. I live in Laredo.
Oh, I know. I still always think of you in North Carolina, though.
Yeah.
That was a good show.
Yeah. You know what was funny at that show the one year? Telling you a little story. A lot of people that knew me, I was at a deal in Portland with the truck the day before that show, and I got overbooked. And I needed to be in Portland, and I needed to have with the truck, and I needed to have the truck at the show in Charlotte the next day.
Oh, yeah.
And it was there.
Oh.
You know how I did it?
How?
The truck that was in Charlotte was my old truck. They hadn't de-identified it yet.
Okay.
When it all happened, I said, did they de-identify or sell my old truck yet? And they said, no. I said, well, don't.
Yeah.
Clean it up and take it up there.
Pulled a
I
quick
said,
one.
externally, it was the same as the truck I was in.
Got it. All right. All right, we do have a call.
But that was funny. Do that.
Yeah. We'll grab it. Let's go to Indiana. Mike, what's on your mind?
Good morning. Good morning, gentlemen, or afternoon, I guess it is. I bought that Mack truck from that fella and got it home. The guy that used to own it, he had a service plan on it. I can get to the point of I got experience with the Mack dealer already. But anyway, he had a service plan on it, and the number 6 or 7 plan or scheduled maintenance on it was the DPF cleaning and, oil change and everything. He said, before we put it under your name, why don't you take it down to the MAC and have all that done and it's paid for, because that service plan isn't transferable. So you might as well get that done. So I did. And they looked it all over. M&K, MAC, maybe I shouldn't mention their name, in Indianapolis. I figured out if I'd work with some kids on a bore. But service manager there calls me back and he says, well, we found the brakes are getting wore down. Well, how much is left? Well, I don't know. I'm just reading what the mechanic said here. And he said he thought he'd seen a right front tire, maybe a seal might be starting to get a little down, right front steer tire. And I said, well, what's this might stuff? He says, well, I'm just going by what he's read here. I said, well, I don't want it. If it needs to be fixed, it needs to be fixed. I said, when I told you to look everything over to let me know before you got everything finished. He goes, oh, okay. I said, well, can we confirm that, or what do we need to do? Well, I imagine he's got to pull, the brakes and the tire and everything off. I said, well, why don't you do it? And he goes, well, we'll have to put you back in the queue. It might be a couple of days. God. I got my experience there that, that you don't get a phone call before that. But in any case, I was driving it around for about 100 miles trying to figure out how all that fancy stuff works in there. And I was super impressed with it. Cruise control and adopting, I call it autopilot and everything on it. But I drove it 100 miles, around 465, different speeds, interstate driving, but I drove it 100 miles, 16.7 miles per gallon, bobtail. Yeah. Got the adopted lift axle and everything on it. So.
All right.
Thought I'd see what you guys thought about that. But anyway. But Henry.
Yes.
So you're talking about right and left-handed threads. We had lunch with Jeff Stoops years ago in Anderson, sitting at the table, and my old FLD was sitting there one day, and told him I wanted the front steer tires swapped out one side to the other. He showed up to pick it up because he said it'll be ready to go by the time I got there. Well, one of the studs on the left-hand side was twisted off, impact laying there, and a cutting torch was laying there. Well, I got the stud tires, so it's left-handed on the left-hand side, right-handed on the right-hand side. I told the guy, he said, I didn't wear it. He said, they're all just froze up. He's already twisted one off. They just froze up, heated them up and everything. I said, well, I'll show you how to get those off here when you get done eating lunch. But they ended up having to buy me a new rim and new studs and stuff on that ordeal. So that ought to tell you what he was doing with the impact. But anyway, that's all I got. So
all right,
I'll let you guys go.
Thanks for the call. All right, we're going to wrap this up for today. I'm turning off the phone lines. We've gone through all the calls. Henry, you want one more conspiracy theory about this before we leave?
Go ahead.
Now, this is coming from a very reliable source, an independent journalist that I follow that's usually right. But this one seems kind of a little out there. So here, I'm just going to read it. Quote, did you know that the president of CrowdStrike Services and the chief security officer served as the executive assistant director of the FBI under the Obama-Biden administration?
Well, no conspiracy there.
Turns out that this strike actually happened. The first sign of this was during Trump's nomination speech last night. This guy worked at the FBI for 24 years and was in charge of cyber investigations worldwide with the FBI. Now he runs CrowdStrike Services. I've been talking about this. This is the whole Chevron deference case and why I'm so excited about it, because this is another example of crony capitalism. These private sector people going back and forth between private sector and the government. When they're in the government, they write rules that benefit their companies in the private sector, and it's a mess. And it should have never been this way. And this looks like this could turn out to be another example of that.
Wow.
Yeah, crazy stuff.
Wow.
All right, I am going to turn off all my devices, and I'm going out to the country where nobody's around, and it won't matter a bit to me. I won't know that this is happening all weekend, and I don't care, and I'm not going to turn on any of my devices, and I'll just wait and see what happens on Monday morning.
Well, I might do the same. My KLR 650 seems like it might want to find a dirt road or something to ride down.
That sounds like fun. I think you should go do that.
There you go.
All right. Henry, thanks as always. And we may or may
And
not.
don't
What?
Don't forget to mark. Don't trying to be teacher's pet here a little bit. Don't forget to mark Alec and Joel.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, they're getting demerits.
Yep. And if you get a chance, check out Jericho. I
Jericho.
think you'll enjoy that.
I may do that. We may not do this show next Friday. And here's why. The week after, we're definitely not doing the show because the week after, I'm taking the whole week off. But I'm to the point now where I'm seriously considering taking off the Friday before and the Monday after, just to extend my vacation because I need one. So we may be here next Friday. We may not. I should probably make the decision sometime today, but we'll see. So if not, I'll see you sometime soon. Be safe, be profitable, be fit and healthy. Always do the hard work and master the journey.